Welcome to Shadow Shorts. This is where every weekday at noon Eastern, I bring to you a short conversation with an expert, a thought leader, a doer in the realm of innovation for the built environment. My name is Jeff Echols. I'm a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. And today I am joined by Margie O'Driscoll. She is the director of the Center for Innovation in San Francisco, and she has posed a really interesting juxtaposition, I think. So we're gonna unpack some things here with Margie. But first, thanks, Margie, for joining me. It's great to see you again, all the way from San Francisco, and I'm really curious to get into this idea that we were talking about before we went live here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, it's great to have you here. And so, the director of the Center of Innovation. First of all, that's a very cool title. It sounds really exciting to me. I mean, obviously you're in San Francisco, you're right there in Silicon Valley. And most of us, I think, when we think about innovation, especially in the VC world, the startup world, we might think Silicon Valley. But what we were talking about before we went live is focusing on something that's happening all the way on the other side of the globe, essentially, in the Ukraine. So why are you focused on Ukraine when it comes to innovation when you're so close to Silicon Valley?
Well, it's a long story, as all things are. The Center for Innovation started out with a much headier title, which was the Center for Innovation in the Design and Construction Industry, which I like to say is just too long for anybody to remember, much less our board of directors, of which KP is a member. So, so we shortened our name to be the Center for Innovation. So the idea was that we could bring together a community of people from the design and construction industry to talk collectively about how we might inspire more innovation in the industry. I came from the architecture world, even though I'm not trained as an architect. And the idea was in the architecture world was architects only talk to architects, contractors only talk to contractors, technologists only talk to technologists, and never the group shall meet together. And the idea of the Center for Innovation was bringing everyone together to talk together about how innovation works, because let's face it, we all know that when we're with our buddies, we always point our fingers at the other direction for whose fault it is when a project fails or there are problems. Contractors say it's the architects say it's the contractor. The technologists say, oh, I didn't get enough venture capital. That's why our products doesn't work well. So if we all have to work collectively, we can actually achieve so much. So that's the broad rubric for the center. Over time, we became an organization that not only talked about innovation from a hard perspective, but also innovation from a more soft perspective. So what I mean by that is we started taking on a role of talking about some of the difficult issues which none of the siloed organizations that whose acronyms are many out there are talking about. So we started talking about really hard issues like why is there such a high rate of mental health issues and suicide in the construction industry? How can we actually remove slavery from the supply chain? How can we start creating a much better cross-disciplinary industry that makes a better world for all? So we started to explore those issues, as well as the nitty-gritty of like how we can improve on industrialized construction, how we can create decarbonized buildings. So we continue to focus on those, but also with this sort of social ethos, which again may come out of us being sort of West Coast California, Bay Area liberals for the most part. So we started talking about those issues. And last year, we got very interested in talking with people in Ukraine about what it was like to build and design during war. We seldom have that opportunity to really talk with people in perhaps the most stressful time of their lives, which is in the heart of war. How do you get up every morning? How do you build teams? How do you repair infrastructure when you're worried about your parents on the front lines in cities which are under siege? How do you bring your best self when you're worried about your children, your partners, all of those people in the midst of war? And it began this whole conversation with a group called Dobrabot. And Dobrobot is a Ukrainian-based organization which does emergency repairs. And so, what does that actually mean? In the war-torn parts, the places under siege right now in Ukraine, if a missile comes and blows up your grandmother's farmhouse roof, she's going to call the mayor of her town and say, "I've lost my roof. Who can help me?" And the mayor will say, I can't do that. I don't know how to build. I'm an elected official. I don't know how to help you. So what has emerged in Ukraine is this volunteer organization called Dobrobot, with more than 40,000 volunteers in the whole nation, goes out and repairs roofs and windows for grandma, for other people. Their work is solely in the repair of housing, hospitals, and schools. So they just repair, if you will, the heart of the country, the social infrastructure. So we started working with them. We started talking with them about, what it was like to build, what were they learning, what were they seeing. And over time, we together hatched this idea that we would bring 10 Ukrainians to the San Francisco Bay Area to look at how we design and build. And so that became a pretty formidable project for our organization. And let me just say that we don't think the Bay Area has the market on creativity. It's just that that's where we're based. So we sort of know who we can reach out to and what we might be able to share with Ukrainians who want to learn a better way, because what they told us is the only way that we know how to build is by the way the Russians taught us, which is incredibly unsustainable. It drives on an energy grid, which is primarily nuclear power and coal. It's primarily concrete construction, so many of those things that we all hope, we can transform into better ways to build. So Dobrobot said, we'd love to come. We think that's really wonderful for us to come and learn from you. But hold on for a second. We actually think you should come first to the Ukraine and see exactly how we design and build. I'm seldom speechless, as you can probably tell, but when they asked me to do that, I was speechless and said, I need to check with my family about that, and so did the other people at the Center for Innovation. But the folks from the Ukraine were pretty adamant that it would be a good thing for us to do. And then we talked with the State Department, we talked with other people, and four Californians flew to the Ukraine, to Kyiv, and spent 5 days there in July. And we learned a lot. We saw some incredible devastation. We saw, the devastation wrought by the Russians included literally flattening a university. I'm just, saying that, flattening a kindergarten, destroying hundreds of units, thousands of units of housing throughout the country. And we came back with a better understanding of the obstacles for the Ukraine to build. And then we came back with the optimism that and the ideas that we think we can show them, which would help promote a better tomorrow for the reconstruction. So you may say, why should we care so much about this country so far away? And that's sort of what you alluded to in the beginning. The Ukraine's 10 hours ahead of California and just a lifetime away. It's almost halfway around the world from us. The Ukraine is about 1.5 times the size of California, but the devastation that they've had is simply amazing. There's been a huge outflow of people from the country. About 2 years ago, the population was 44 million. Now it's only 36 million people, as so many people have fled to the United States and Europe. And what we learned on our trip there was how concerned Ukrainians are with the need to rebuild right now during the war, so that when the war ends, people have homes and schools to come back to. The mayor of Irpin said it to me most clearly when he said, I need to have a kindergarten, a home, and an office for people to come back to. Otherwise, they're not going to come back to this country. And so we need to make sure that we create space for them. So that was our vow. The mayor of Irpin is going to be coming along with members of parliament and other mayors to the San Francisco Bay Area in January to come and understand more advanced means and methods of construction, and also learn more about infrastructure recovery. So we've got many wonderful partners, including the Trumbull Foundation and individual donors who care about this. But I think what has guided the Center for Innovation, and this is a very long way of answering your question, so I apologize, Jeff, is that for the Center for Innovation, when you think about the opportunities for rebuilding in Ukraine, it's going to be as profound of an opportunity for innovation in the design and construction industry as Reconstruction was after World War II.
That's a striking way to put it. I think we often think about, I mean, when we're having conversations about industrialized construction or housing insecurity or carbon or any of these topics that are the most impactful. I mean, they're already identified as having the biggest impact on the future of the built environment. I think we often, one, I think as many in this audience will be United States based. And so I think it's really easy for us to be US centric in our thinking. And thankfully, most of us don't have experience or much need to think about what it's like to experience what you're saying. The war, right? War, the devastation of war. But the way that you put it right there, right? The rebuilding, biggest rebuilding since World War II. And as you say that, I'm sitting in a house that in a neighborhood that was started right at the beginning of World War II. And many of the houses in this neighborhood were built for GIs coming back. That really puts it in perspective. Maybe it's just for me sitting here in this neighborhood, but I think we can get our heads wrapped around that. Right? Okay, wow, that was a time of incredible progress, and I think we at Shadow we talk about, and KP Reddy talks about this all the time. He talks about this exponential decade of innovation. It's amazing when you put it that way because we usually think about it in terms of technology, but you're talking about it in terms of this recovery, this rebuilding need, which brings even a different way of talking about scale to the conversations. That's really fascinating.
Well, the scale of the devastation is really profound. About 180 schools have been destroyed. 1,300 educational institutions have been damaged. There have been 700 attacks on hospital workers and clinics and hospitals. There have been 1.5 million homes damaged or destroyed. I mean, the scale, and these are statistics from a couple of months ago, and the war is really ongoing. So it's a big moment. And I think the other thing that we've all observed, I think perhaps more casually in news reports here in the United States, is the Ukrainian embrace of technology as a way to really encourage transparency and dispel a history which had been more corrupt. So they're really using technology to encourage, transparency among all aspects of government. So we heard that commitment almost on the hour from the people we were meeting with when we were in Kyiv, which included ministry officials, members of parliament, mayors, NGO leaders. I mean, we talked with a lot of people who really have intimate knowledge of the country and are so committed towards rebuilding a new future for their country. And they love their country. I made someone cry once when we were on a Zoom call by just talking about the incredible beauty and heritage that the Ukrainian people have in the way that they have built their buildings historically and the passion they have for their country. And it's up to us as we think about this rebuilding effort, not to say this is the American way or this is the San Francisco way, so this is the right way for you. The rebuilding effort has to be led by Ukrainians, but I think they were really moved when we came to Ukraine and said, "We're here to serve your goals. What are your goals? What would you like to see? Here are some ideas for how you can do it, but not in a didactic way of this is the way you must do it at all." They have to choose their own future, but I do feel as though there's a lot we can offer. I talked with a member of parliament and I said, I live in a house at which we have solar panels on the roof, and we contribute energy back to the grid in my city. And he said, "Oh, that's because you live in California and you all live in a beach climate." And I said, "Well, I don't. I live in San Francisco, and it's mighty foggy and can get pretty nippy and damp in San Francisco." So let me show you that's not it. But he didn't quite believe me when I said you could actually have a house built off the grid. And that is not a factor of anything except exposure. He's never been exposed to this idea that many of us would consider it like an aspirational one. It's not even on his screen. So I think there are ways that we can really aid Ukrainians in understanding that there is another way to build. And it's a great opportunity for the world to really show how we might move forward.
Yeah, and it strikes me too that you mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation. I mean, basically, I don't remember if the word collaboration was in there, but collaboration, right? When the architects are working with the contractors, with the engineers, with the developers, et cetera. I think this is a really great opportunity, and I think that's part of the beauty of this precipice that we're on with the technology that's available is the importance certainly, but the ability for Ukraine to build Ukraine. Like you said, not in the American way, not in the U.S. way, but in the Ukrainian, whatever the future Ukrainian way is. I mean, we could get into architecture history, go back to architecture school all of a sudden, but I think that's what is probably in the future, and I think that's a beautiful opportunity, and I'm glad that the Center for Innovation is playing a part in this to just aid in that effort, because we have the tools, and that's what they are, the tools, right? How are you going to use the tools? How are we going to use the tools, et cetera, to achieve these goals and imagine a new future for Ukraine? That's exciting. It feels strange to say it in that way, but that is exciting in a way.
Well, the sorry truth. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go right ahead.
I said, this just about an hour ago, I got off the phone with somebody in Maui, talking about the devastations of the fires there. And I couldn't help but think that these challenges, which are both near and far from us in terms of rebuilding, given climate change, are only going to become more real in our lives. So our ability to mobilize quickly and sustainably is going to be really important. Right now at the Center for Innovation, we're thinking deeply about Ukraine, but it's an unfortunate way that the world seems to be going in this moment. And I don't mean to be apocalyptic about it, but we're going to be called to action more and more frequently as we have to all respond to these challenges, both in our neighborhoods and around the world.
Yeah, so I would love to have you back, because that's the mobilization issue, I think, is going to be forefront in innovation for the built environment. I mean, it has to be, as you're identifying in that comment right there. So you need to come back. So that's the challenge. You need to come back so we can have that conversation as well, because it's certainly tied to this. But I think, looking at things that are going on, like in our incubator that we're running right now, and other places where we're watching and participating in innovation, I think you're touching on something that's going to lead the way in a lot of ways. So let's stick a pin in that one and schedule another conversation so we can do that, because I think it's one that we ought to have. Margie,
Yeah.
thank you so much for this conversation. It is, and before we went live, we talked about, there's certainly Ukraine, but there are things that are happening right now as we speak. I haven't seen any news today, but unfortunately it's not a unique situation throughout the world. It also unfortunately develops unique opportunities, but that's the key. It's how are we going to get involved in those opportunities and assist with those opportunities. So thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for helping us to understand what the Center for Innovation is doing. Not necessarily in your backyard, but there is a correlation there. Certainly, there's a connection there. So So thanks for jumping on with me. I appreciate it. And for those that are watching or listening, if you want to know more about the Center for Innovation, what's the best way, Margie, for them to get information? Is it to reach out to you on LinkedIn, or how would you prefer that people
Sure.
get
That's
more
great. You can
information?
reach out to me either via LinkedIn, or we have a pretty robust website, which is the centerforinnovation.org.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So centerforinnovation.org. As Margie mentioned, if you're familiar with Shadow Partners, Shadow Ventures, you certainly know KP Reddy. He is on the board there at the center. So there's a little connection here, certainly. But check it out, centerforinnovation.org. And Margie's going to be back. I'm going to hold her to that. It's so that we can talk about mobilization, because that's another great topic. Until then, I'll be back again tomorrow with another one of these Shadow Shorts. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Really an honor to be
Absolutely.
here.
Oh, it's great to have you here.